Konnichiwa, minasan. Hey guys, Sig here with another Japanese language video for you. So what I'm bringing to you guys today is just a very short, sort of little supplemental video about tools and tips that I have for you guys for helping improve the speed and the efficiency at which you can learn Japanese language. So let's just jump right into it. The very first thing I wanted to go into with you guys is the fundamental concept of how do you learn any language, not just Japanese? And the first step that you have to take in any language is learning the alphabet and pronunciation. You guys have hopefully seen by this point, I already have a video about this for Japanese, about the kana system and proper pronunciation. The next thing that you need is to learn fundamental sentence structure. The next thing you need is to start building your vocabulary set, and I have here efficiently. And so what this means is that they've done studies and found that for the first 1,000 words of a language you learn will allow you to read like 70% of all text in the language. And then the next 1,000 you add after that only adds another 10% to your total vocabulary. So you choose vocabulary that's going to be frequently used in the language that you're wanting to speak. You don't try to teach yourself like abstract terminology just because it has a certain stroke order in the kanji system. You're not helping yourself in that way. The next step of language acquisition is application. Start trying to write simple paragraphs. Try listening to some sample dialogues from some textbooks you might have. Those sorts of things. Doing this is what will help sort of train your mind to think in the language that you're wanting to pick up. And then the last stage is engage in exchange with other speakers. This is the actual conversational point of language acquisition. The next concept I want to go into with you guys is what is important for being able to learn a language effectively. And the first most important thing is actually two things. It's commitment and diligence, which really means enthusiasm. Learning a language is not fast at all. It's slow and it takes constant practice and like daily practice. There's this saying that I really like that is, if you're not improving, you're regressing. And what this means is that if you are not getting better at something every single day, you're getting worse in the process of it. You can't stay at the same level that you are when doing nothing. To stay at the level that you currently are, you have to still daily be using what amount of the language you know. So again, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And so that's why it's so important that every day you just do something, guys, to work on the language that day. And because it takes a while to actually get to a point of competency in a language, it's really easy to feel burnt out after some time. And you don't have a lot of drive to keep going. And that's why I say here, like, really the most important thing you have to have for this process is enthusiasm. You just gotta want it. You've got to want it more than you want anything else. And that is what will give you the drive to every day put work into the process. The next thing that you really need is a mentor. You have to have someone in your life that's better than you at the thing you're trying to improve at to tell you how to get better at it and to point out mistakes that you make. You cannot do this process on your own. I promise you, you will fail. At some point, you will have to turn to someone else that knows more than you to answer a question that you have. The next thing that I have here is exposure. And this is why the human brain is really interesting in that, so if you're sitting alone in America trying to learn Japanese, you'll spend months, you'll spend years trying to do it and only be okay at it. But if I picked you up on a plane and flew you out to some farm in Hokkaido where the people that live there speak nothing but Japanese, and I just dropped you there, you would be very competent in Japanese 3 to 4 months into that process. And the reason for this is that the brain in that situation changes into like a sort of survival state mode where it just starts soaking up everything that comes to it. And so when you're in an environment where the only thing that your brain is getting is the language that you're trying to learn, you exponentially increase the rate at which you're going to take up that language. So that's why I say exposure of some kind, interacting with the language in some way, not just daily, but around the clock, daily, constantly. You need to have something in your life that is making you use the language. And then the last thing that I have here for you guys is you need some helpful tools and techniques. That's what this video is all about. So getting right into it, the first thing I want to go with you guys is study tools. And I will just tell you right now, everything that I'm going to list here is something that I own in my personal library and think is absolutely invaluable for the process. The first thing I have here is the textbook series called Genki. And the elementary level has 2 textbooks. And this is what I was taught Japanese out of when I took it for a year at university, my last year before graduating. I think the Genki series is a really good series. There are things in it that I wish it did differently and wish it did better, but that's what the goal of this video series is, essentially, is when I was living in Japan, at one point I sat down and I asked myself that question of, if I was going to try to teach someone Japanese, how would I do it? And I pretty much built a Word document that I'm pulling from for these video series out of my Genki background and what I wish I had done differently in the process, and things that I wish that I had learned at different points in the process. But Genki 1 and 2, great resources to have. The next one I have is a book series called Mina no Nihongo, which means Japanese for everybody. And it's very similar to Genki, and actually, this is the book series that if you're in Japan and you're taking a Japanese language course, like I worked for Kyoto University, and as a worker, I was allowed to take Japanese language courses. This is the book series that they love to use in Japan to teach people that are currently living there the language. So if you want to go to the source, Mina no Nihongo is where you want to go to. The next one I have for you guys is, this is Nihongo So Matome. And this book series actually is, you can maybe see here, it says like, these book series say N3. And what these books are meant for is the JLPT, the Japanese Language Proficiency Test. This is the standardized exam that you take if you want to receive a official certification in your Japanese language proficiency. It's offered in Japan twice a year, once in July and once in December, but in America, it's only offered once a year in December. And so, if you're wanting to take this exam, I cannot recommend enough you getting this book series for the level that you're wanting to take. It goes through every aspect of the exam: grammar, vocabulary, listening comprehension, reading, analysis. It has everything you need to be able to put yourself into the best position to pass the exam. I also have listed here what's called the Kodansha, the Kanji Learner's Dictionary. It's every kanji in the language, and I love this resource for just, this is the thing that you want to refer when you start getting much deeper into the language and are regularly using kanji, and you want to start learning the meaning of strokes, because that is what the kanji system, like the character, every character has a meaning, but not just the character, the structure of the character has meaning, and there's similarities between related characters. And the Kodansha is amazing for you getting to see and learn those patterns, and just really add a great amount of depth to the process and your enjoyment and pride in the language. The next thing I have here is, it's going to be a series of smartphone apps, basically. I have all these on my smartphone. The first one, it's called JED, Japanese English Dictionary. Guys, I literally every single day of my life use this application. When I was living in Japan, every single day of my life, I used this application. Besides getting some textbooks, I don't know that there is a resource that is more helpful in the process of learning Japanese than this application has been for my life. Totally honest. The next thing I have is another kanji dictionary. It's called Edit. And while I prefer the JED dictionary to ADICT. What ADICT has that JED doesn't that I really love is a kanji lookup system. And there's actually multiple ways you can do this. You can do it by the number of strokes that are in a character. You can do it by a method that's called the skip method, which basically divides kanjis structurally. Does it have a left and right component? Does it have a top and bottom component? Does it have some little bracket enclosure structure that has something under it? You can look up kanji by that method. It also has a hand-drawn method that you can draw the kanji that you're just looking at, and it will look it up for you. I will tell you guys, though, that that's a little bit tricky in that you have to use proper stroke order and proper stroke number. And this is something that you're definitely not going to know for the first while in your Japanese journey. But once you know that system, this tool is invaluable for every kanji I come across that I don't immediately know. ADICT, baby. It's going to give it to me, and then I'm going to find multiple words, and you can... When you find the kanji in ADICT, you can copy it to the clipboard. So you can then transfer it into JED by copy-paste and then find every word that that kanji is included in. This duo together, unstoppable, guys. The next thing I want to recommend to you guys is not just a smartphone app, but it's actually a website too. It's called Weblio. It's just a English Japanese dictionary. Again, like both these other ones are, but this again, whenever I got to Japan, I discovered that this is the website that pretty much everyone in Japan uses themselves for learning English words or for looking up English words. So again, if you want to know the tools that the Japanese people themselves use for Japanese English translations, they love Weblio. And I also have had great experiences with it. I really appreciate the example sentences that it has for everything that you look up, so that you can learn not just what the word means, but how to use it in a sentence and like naturally use it in a sentence. This isn't just like Japanese 101 fundamental level sentences. I mean, they'll talk about like the economy and politics, and they'll use like natural Japanese expressions and colloquialisms using these words. So you're learning the language, you're learning the word in the natural state in which it's used. I love it. This next one is another huge one. You guys have maybe, like, if you've looked up and Googled methods for learning Japanese, I will bet every single one of you have come across this app being recommended. It's called Anki. And so what Anki is it's a repetitive learning. I'm blanking on the word for what it is, what the actual term is, but they're flashcards that you review, but based on how well you identify knowing or not knowing the flashcard, it spaces out how long you go before it shows you that flashcard again. And Anki is such a ubiquitously used tool that you can go to Anki's website and search decks that people have already made and uploaded. People have made decks specifically for JLPT exam vocabulary that you can just download straight to your phone. Besides, you can make your own flashcards. I've had success with both, and I do both frequently. One thing that I will say about Anki is, so whenever I was really young in this process, I had read somewhere that it was recommended that you try to learn 7 new words a day. And I started that way, and I felt so unsatisfied by it because it felt so easy. 7 words a day, this is nothing. I can easily do double this, so I did. I kicked it up to 14 words a day, and it was going fine, but the way the system works is, like I said, it spaces out how often you see certain cards based on how well you know them or don't know them. So there may be some kanji that you just pick up like that, and you say, I know it immediately. You won't see it for a week, but it'll be a week, and during the 7 days, you're adding 14 words a day, and what winds up happening is you get like a month into this process, and there comes a day that you open up Anki, and you have 100 words to review, and you're like, oh my god, how did this happen? It's because of how many raw words you're putting into the system, and this is really intimidating to try to come up against. And it won't just happen one time. It'll happen one day, and then it'll happen a week later. It'll happen a week later. And so it becomes like this is how you lose your enthusiasm and drive for the language. It's things like that where you're like, oh my god, I have homework tonight, I have an exam Friday, I work 4 days this week, I don't have time to do 100 words today, I'll do it tomorrow. But tomorrow there's another excuse, and then you say tomorrow, and tomorrow there's another excuse, and suddenly this thing that you've been doing faithfully every single day for weeks, you don't do for 3 days, and 3 days becomes a week, and during all this time, the system is still running. There's still cards that it's adding to the system that it wants you to review. You haven't done Anki in a week. Now you have 200, maybe 300 words that you're needing to review, and you all of a sudden have put yourself in this hole of, I can't do this, that this is too much. And now you're working against yourself, and suddenly a month has gone by, 3 months has gone by, and I'm telling you guys, I am guilty of this. I am guilty of this more than once. I am currently guilty of this. And this goes back to the very first thing that I told you guys, that when you're not every day working on this, when you're not improving, you're getting worse. These things that you 3 to 4 to 5 weeks ago could identify at the snap of a finger, literally, you're rusty on them now. And so you need to review them more sooner. And this, again, the system is just always moving. It's always changing when it's showing you the cards, and day to day, how many cards are you going to have to review? Guys, learn from my experience. Just do 7 words a day. I know it might feel frustrating, and you're going to feel for the longest time that you're not making any progress, but I promise you, that feeling of making slow progress outweighs losing progress for months, for years, guys. The next thing I have is some websites that will be useful for you guys. I already told you guys about Weblio, and the first one I have is something called Lang 8. And I actually, when making this presentation, recently learned something has happened at Lang 8, and apparently they are no longer registering new accounts. They're directing people to a phone app that's called Hi Native, but if you already had a Lang 8 account that you can go back to, well, then I guess you don't need to know what Lang 8 is. But for the people that don't, then what Lang 8 is a website where you could go in and you basically just wrote little journal entries in the language that you're wanting to learn, and you would post it. And there's a community of users on the website, and there are people that speak a native language, and they're learning a new language. And so the people that are native Japanese speakers, they'll go through the posts of people that are not Japanese speakers that are wanting to learn Japanese, and they'll read their posts and offer them feedback and revisions and tell them mistakes they've made. And in return, you're supposed to then go through and look for posts in the language that you speak naturally and help other people. So it's a community of native speakers helping people learning the languages that they speak natively. I highly recommend checking this out, as, again, this is just a very simple thing that every day you can come home from school and just write a 5-sentence journal entry about, this is what I did today at work, this is what I did today at school. Just describe your day and post it. Let someone tell you what you did right, what you did wrong, and you also push yourself and challenge yourself. Try to use new words. Look up words that you don't know, and experiment, try, because if you don't try, you don't fail, and if you don't fail, you don't learn. So don't be afraid to make the mistakes in this process. Throw them out there and let other people help you fix your mistakes so that you can get better. Another one I have here is called iknow.jp. You can probably tell by the .jp web address that this is a website hosted in Japan. This is a website that I found very soon after I moved to Japan, that it's a paid subscription website. I think it was only like $12 or $15 a month, but I had by that point tried literally dozens of online digital learning tools and textbooks, and iknow was the one that was by far the one that was most effective for me. And before you even start the process, it gives you a little like aptitude test so that it measures where in this process are you and where do we, like, it doesn't force you to start at the very beginning. It identifies where you are in your language acquisition journey and places you there and starts giving you materials to work with where you are and start letting you take your next steps. I remember there's listening comprehension, there's fill in the blank. It's been so long since I've used the website. I'm not sure what it might look like now, but I highly recommend checking out I Know. I used it. I loved it. I guess I'm going to give a little shout out here to, again, also, if you've ever Googled any amount of Japanese, you almost certainly have come across the website of Maggie Sensei. I love Maggie Sensei's website. It's super cute, also really simple to like approach and understand, and it's also very accurate and very helpful. There's been numerous things that I have learned, like some nuances of Japanese language that I picked up from Maggie Sensei. Definitely don't hesitate to check out her website for any questions you might have about anything. Another service I have here, it's another paid service. It's called Japanese Pod 101. I've used this service in the past, and it was okay, but I came across Japanese Pod 101 like a year and a half or two and a half years into my language studying process, of which I am now at like 7 years in. So I wasn't a beginner at that point. And Japanese Pod 101, well, it has literally thousands of podcasts of dialogues that you can download to listen to on your commute or like during the day for improving your listening comprehension. But they can lean, at least in my experience, on the simplistic side. So it wasn't all that helpful for me at the point at which I discovered it. But if you're early in this process, I think Japanese Pod 101 can be very useful. I will also warn you though, they will email you some crap like every single day. Your email box is going to die when you register for Japanese Pod 101. But still a lot of helpful resources there. I don't want to knock them too hard. This is one of the few that I actually have not used. It's called italki. It's a paid service, but what this is you'll get actual Japanese teachers, a lot like Lang 8, but instead of them just being random citizens of the country, you'll get actual teachers to do tutoring or lessons with you or to review submissions that you send to them for things that you want them to check to help you improve your language. So you get like actual certified professionals to help you on your journey. Another thing I have here is called jgram.org. This is a little bit of a situational website in my opinion. I've used this website to great effect especially for learning grammar structures. And it's, again, really helpful for if you're preparing for the JLPT. They have entire sections of their website dedicated wholly to JLPT preparation. And then the last thing I have here is the JLPT website, which obviously if you're planning on taking the exam, you should go to their website so that you learn how to register for it and when to register for it. But they also have an immense amount of resources there, like past exams to help you prepare for the process. And this isn't just going to be helpful for you preparing for the exam, but just in general Japanese language. The last thing that I have here, I don't actually have written here, but I want to tell you guys about a service that's called NHK News Easy. I follow them on Twitter. I have just followed NHK's Twitter also, but so NHK is essentially PBS in Japan. It's Japan's public broadcasting station, and I am a super geek that loves public broadcasting, so I love NHK. People would ask me when I was living in Japan, like, did I watch television? And I really didn't frequently while I was there because I didn't want to pay for the service, and I was just using Netflix through a VPN and playing video games in my spare time. But I digress. The one amount of television that I would watch, and the radio that I would listen to whenever I would go to bed at night was NHK radio, and the Japanese people always laughed so hard whenever I told them that I loved NHK, because people typically don't say I love NHK. But NHK News Easy is a service NHK provides that it's news reports, but it's in simplified Japanese. So it's actually intentionally made for people that are learning Japanese. And so like it's not going to be something that beginners can approach because it's actual news. Like, it's news about the world and Japan and politics. Like, it's actually higher level stuff that you don't want to take on that challenge at the start of your journey. But once you get like N4 and a half towards the N3 level, you definitely should check out NHK News Easy, because it should be readable by you. And again, you're actually learning current events that are happening in the country. So it's a great way to stay informed about what's happening there. The last thing that I have here, well, I think it's the last thing that I have for you guys, is study techniques. These are things that I have found myself through this process that have been invaluable for me. And then, like I said earlier, the very first thing is get a partner, get a mentor. The entire point of language is that you're communicating with another person. You're not meant to learn a language on your own, because language by nature is meant to be shared between people. That's its whole point. That's your whole goal, is understanding what another person is saying to you. So you should have a partner to practice with. The other thing I have written here is that it adds accountability. If you're working with someone, you don't fall into the trap that I've been telling you guys about of, oh, I haven't reviewed Anki in a month and I'm starting to get rusty about the things that I used to know on. If you have a partner, then every week you guys should be checking in with each other saying, what did you work on this week? What did you learn this week? And that should drive you to work on and learn something that week, so that you don't go into that meeting with your accountability buddy looking like a fool. I didn't practice the language this week. Well, I did, so now you're not helpful to me. Why did you do me that way? Get a partner. Get someone to work with. The next thing I have is, I've said it, I don't know how many times thus far, daily practice. If you're not improving, you're regressing. You have to be at this every day, guys. I've already said, start a diary. This is super helpful for it's the easiest way to just start using the language, even on your own. Just talk about what you did that day. 5 sentences, 10 to 15 minutes of just like thinking in the language. Similarly, I have here, apply it to your own life. When you're doing some simple task, like if you're in the kitchen making a sandwich, can you describe what you're doing in Japanese? You should try it. And the words that you don't know, you should write them down, and you should look them up, and you should keep a notebook of these words, and you should like go back and review these. And this has an additional side benefit of, when you keep a notebook, you'll go back, and when you've been 6 months studying, you'll go back to this notebook and look at the things you wrote on the first page. And it's going to seem so like commonplace to you now, and that should make you feel good. That should make you feel proud about what you've managed to accomplish in this time. But yeah, just like whatever you're doing in your day, if you're walking from point A to point B at your workplace, try to narrate what you're doing to your head, or to yourself in your head in Japanese. If you have a conversation with someone, when you walk away, immediately in your head, see if you can say anything that you just said to that person in Japanese. And again, whatever you don't know how to say, make a memo of it and look it up later. This next one is huge for me. Do not watch anime with English subtitles and think you are learning Japanese. Every single person that has ever said that this is how they learn Japanese, or says that this is how they are learning Japanese, is a liar and a fool. You will not learn Japanese by watching anime with English subtitles. And I can tell you point blank that the number one reason for that is, structurally, the Japanese language is exactly opposite of the English language. So what is being said in Japanese in the anime and what you're reading on the screen does not match at all. You're not going to see the text of what's being said until the next screen. And then what they're saying is what you previously read on the previous subtitle. You are not helping yourself in this process. You are kidding yourself if you think you're helping yourself through this process. Just don't do it. If you want to watch anime with Japanese subtitles, I highly recommend this. I started doing this shortly before moving to Japan, and then after living in Japan, and that was like seeing the world in a new way when I started watching anime with Japanese subtitles that actually match what was being said. Like, my listening comprehension shot up immediately when I started watching Japanese things with Japanese subtitles. And again, because this is how television works over there also, is you frequently have just little subtitles for what's going on. Like on game shows and talk shows, they'll have Japanese subtitles all the time. Super helpful. And then the very last thing that I have here, we've already said, exposure is the most important thing. Just in some way, engaging yourself with the language every day, around the clock, every day. I run my computer and my cell phone in Japanese. I listen to like electronic Japanese music and J-pop music. I like having the language in my ears, which is somewhat helpful. That's a little bit like the anime thing. It's not as helpful as you might think it is compared to like listening to textbook dialogues that are actual conversations that people are having rather than singing. But I digress. It still is using the language in some way. There's so many things you can do every day to, even if you're alone, you can interact with the language. It's difficult, but you can do it and the means are there. You just got to do it. Shameless shout out page like always. Like and subscribe the video to help me be able to make more of these. This is what I want to do for you guys as often as I can. I would love if I could every day spend as much of my time as possible making this sort of content for you guys and just sharing my experience with you guys. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel. You help me do that. Thank you so much for you guys that are doing it. Follow me on Twitter at Sigma is Greater to see what I'm working on at the moment and what plans I have, and to see whenever I post new content so you can get it immediately. The last thing I have, if you want personal help or a lesson topic, message me, request it, leave a comment. I will be happy to make that lesson for you. Until next time, guys. Ja, matane!